6:30 p.m. Mr. Bernstein, can you do roll call?
Board Member Elizabeth Callahan,
Here.
Board Member Nubia Duval-Wilson,
Here.
Board Member Regina Eckert,
Here.
Board Member Bill Gifford,
Here.
Board Member Will Meyer,
Here.
Board Member Shana Saka-Gable,
Here.
Board President Kawi Telesford,
Here.
Board Member Arun Vadlamani,
Here.
Here.
All right, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please take note that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in the following manner. That written notice was sent from the Office of the Secretary of the Board at 2:30 on January 5th, 2024. That said notice was sent via email to Maplewood and South Orange Township clerks and the editors of the News Record, Star Ledger, Tappan to Soma, and the Village Green. Whereas the board has determined that one issue is permitted by the NJSA 10:4-12 to be discussed without the public in attendance and shall be discussed during an executive session to be held on Thursday, May 14th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. And any matter which by express provision of the federal law, statute, or the rule of court shall be rendered confidential or excluded from the public discussion. The nature of the matter described as specifically as possible without undermining the need for confidentiality is attorney-client privilege and personnel. Whereas the length of the executive session is estimated to be 60 minutes, after which the public meeting of the board shall reconvene and proceed with business where formal action will be taken. Now therefore, be it resolved that the South Orange Maplewood Board of Education will go into executive session for the above stated reasons and only. Be it further resolved that the board hereby declares that its discussion of the aforementioned subjects will be made public at the time when the public's interest in disclosure is greater than any privacy or governmental interest being protected from disclosure. Make a motion to go into executive session. Thank you, Board Member Eckert. All in favor? All right, we're going into executive session. All right, good evening, everyone. I would like to make a motion to move up public speaks for any students that have signed up. If there are any students that have signed up to do public speaks, I want to make a motion to have them speak first. Can I have a second?
Second. Oh,
All in favor? Aye. Are there any students that want to speak? Okay, can we, okay, let's get the. Signed up? Yes.
All right. Hi. My name is Will Clifford. I am a student at Columbia High School, and I just wanted to make sure that, like, I have many great teachers, and I just want to make sure that they don't they don't go through all the trouble that Sanchez is going through right now. I have many different teachers who have helped me in many different ways, gave me a safe learning environment and gave me a safe learning environment for other kids. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I was going to suggest, if any of you want to grab some chairs, we are within code, so you can, if you don't want to stand, if there's some available chairs on the side, please grab one and have a seat if you'd like to have a seat. Thank you.
All right, I think then, if that's it, then we'll move on to the budget presentation. All right, so tonight, the structure of tonight is we're going to have the business administrator give an update on the budget. We will then have our first public speaks. We're going to keep that oriented to the budget, so any sort of public speaks on the budget, we'll have that. Then we'll go to the action portion of the meeting, and then we'll have our second public speech, which will be open. And for that, we will give everyone 2 minutes.
Good evening, everybody. The budget process begins with the central office staff and administration outlining and prioritizing the tools and components necessary to provide a thorough and comprehensive educational program. The district's goal is to maximize our resources, infuse flexibility, and provide tools to ensure an exceptional educational program, a program that ensures a safe, secure, and healthy environment. The school budget is a proposed plan to enable the leadership to successfully achieve these goals. This budget includes approximately an additional $1 million in state aid. The increase in state aid is fortunate for our school district, but we also know that it can be decreased just as easily in the future. This presentation is essentially a recap of how I, the acting superintendent, and administrators work together to build a budget. We use past experiences and data to make our decisions. Tonight, we're going to cover the budget development process and budget calendar, projected revenue, enrollment, expenditures, and the tax impact. The administration started budget meetings in November last year. We collaborated to make a list of the next steps. This involved identifying areas of opportunity to implement efficiencies and save money inside and outside of the classroom. Building level administrators also communicated their needs and wants at each school. This budget was created to meet our obligation for a thorough and efficient education. It was also built keeping in mind that it was not an option to have an impact on intentional integration or construction. This is the same as last year. One of the early steps is to estimate and identify what the possible revenue of the district is going to be. In our January FFT meeting, this included discussing the tax levy, state and federal aid, and any other adjustments. After projecting the revenue side of the budget, we were able to identify what the district's expenditures would be. As the expenditures are identified and we receive the official state aid notices, the district can determine if there is a surplus or deficit. To balance the budget, the goals and priorities of the district are used as guidelines. This includes using any adjustments if available and any projects that might require the use of our reserve funds. We start with evaluating revenue. The two main sources of the district's revenue are the local tax levy and state aid. The tax levy increase is $4,041,835 for the 24-25 school year. This is a combination of the allowable 2% cap increase as well as the allowable enrollment adjustment and healthcare adjustment. Traditionally, the district has budgeted extraordinary aid at $1 million, as this funding isn't awarded until July. We have increased it to $2 million this year. Over the last 3 years, it has been consistently over $2 million, so we believe this was a safe increase. The audited fund balance is the remaining funds as of June 30th, 2023, that must carry into the 24-25 school budget. Before the pandemic, the state allowed districts to carry 2% of our general fund budget as a surplus for the next year. During the pandemic, that percentage increased to 4%. Now that the pandemic is over, the state lowered the percentage to 2%. This budget does include the use of withdrawal of $1.5 million from maintenance reserve. This will leave us with a balance of approximately $3.2 million for future use. South Orange Maplewood School District has established a stable base with reserve funds, providing security for emergencies. The funds from capital reserve and maintenance reserve could be used to soften any impact of an emergency, as well as close any budget gap that might be left to balance the budget by reducing maintenance supply accounts or capital projects being supported by the general fund. The district does implement procedures to maximize interest earning opportunities and does receive some tuition-based students. We are conservative in our budget concerning the state and federal grants, as we don't apply for these grants until June. We budget 80% in case there are reductions. This also shows a decrease as the COVID relief funds are being spent. One of our revenues is also preschool aid. This revenue is outside of the general fund and can only be spent on preschoolers attending our Montrose School or one of our outside providers. This is the operating revenue that is currently being budgeted for the 24-25 school year. The district is currently receiving approximately $2.4 million in debt service aid. Debt service aid increased this year according to the schedule of bond payments. Also included in revenue is the debt service fund balance. The district has a debt service fund balance of approximately $4 million that was used to reduce the debt service tax levy. This pie chart shows that 78.9% of the district's budget is financed by the local tax levy, and 6.7% of the district's budget comes from state aid. This is important because when the state looks at the local fair share, it calculates how much a district can afford to contribute toward the adequacy budget. This number is calculated by entering a town's equalized value and aggregate income into a formula. If the state doesn't believe a community is collecting enough tax revenue, they may decrease state aid. Enrollment. This chart represents the history of enrollment in the district. You can see that an enrollment has increased by 132 students from last year to this year. This is an encouraging trend that we hope will continue. Expenditures. We're going to cover salary and benefits and contracted services, tuition, transportation, and some high-level explanations. Salaries, benefits, and contracted services. This budget is anticipating contractual contract increases because the state requires us to perform a public bid every 3 years. Even though our custodial services were bid last year, we're going to rebid because of the additional services needed for the additions from constructions on multiple buildings. COVID funds we're paying for permanent substitutes in our schools. Those funds have expired, and we'll be removing the substitutes from our schools. To help reduce the burden of the loss of the permanent substitutes, the district recently increased rates for substitute pay this year to stay competitive. You will notice a slight decrease in the category with special services, technology, and curriculum. This is where an increase for paraprofessionals is budgeted. The district is continuing summer programs, and the students are going to have access to tutoring. The district does have programs in district to support special needs students. Our special services department continues on strategies to build programs. Out-of-district tuition had a slight increase. However, with all the tuition account numbers combined, the overall cost of tuition decreased. This was led by a decrease in CSSD, County Special Services District. Preschool funds are for regular education services only. The preschool program is run as a full inclusion program. The district reserves seats for special needs children to participate in a full inclusion program, and the district has to fund the special services portion of preschool education. There is a transfer in the budget, and it comes out of this category of the budget. In the 24-25 school year, the transfer is approximately $1,525,000. As you can see, we did have a slight increase in funding for transportation. This was mainly driven by an increase in aid in lieu payments to families who send their children to non-public schools. We do this in place of providing transportation. We will also be reviewing and exploring shared services and a reevaluation of all in-district routes this spring. In the school/department category, this covers a myriad of expenses. However, this expenditure did have a decrease as the K-5 math initiative was implemented last year. Special services, technology, curriculum, maintenance and operation, etc. In this group of expenditures, there was an increase. This is driven by the need to increase the investment for our paraprofessionals. Expenditures versus revenue. This slide shows that tonight we do have a balanced budget. Budget challenges. This slide shows that our budgeted fund balance reduced by approximately $4.2 million from last year. Before COVID, the maximum unreserved fund balance a district could carry or could maintain was 2% during COVID districts. During COVID, districts were allowed to maintain 4% of unreserved fund balance. This 4% allowance ended on June 30th, 2022. During the preparation of the 23-24 budget, the state budget software calculated the amount of fund balance the district was required to budget. The amount of the fund balance budgeted in the 23-24 school year was a combination of excess surplus generated in 21-22 per the audit, along with the unreserved fund balance calculation I mentioned earlier. The increases in the following areas on this slide contributed to a budget deficit. Due to the challenges listed above, the district is facing a reduction in force of approximately $2.7 million. Reducing projected expenses and increasing revenues assisted in offsetting the projected deficit. As you can see on the left, we have areas of expenses where we were able to have savings, and on the right, we have an area called revenue, and this is where we were able to take some of our healthcare adjustments, enrollment adjustments, and also increase our extraordinary aid, and there's also the increase in state aid. Tax impact. This reflects the impact of our enrollment and health benefits adjustment on increasing the tax levy from 2% to 3.01%. But with the additional debt service aid, the overall impact is 1.88%. This is because we received some tax relief with interest earned on bond money. As construction carries on, the amount of interest earned decreases from the funds being drawn down. Due to the property reevaluation in each town, the average assessed value has been updated. However, the net valuation taxable information is not available from the county yet, from the county. Traditionally, that information is not finalized until May. When we have the information, we will provide the final tax impact. This is our debt service. This slide shows our debt service payments and includes the breakdown of each payment. Highlights. This is the third consecutive year that we have had a lot of technology built into the budget. To continue the district's commitment to technology infrastructure, the district is participating in a lease purchase finance agreement. This will ensure that the technology needs of the district will continue to move forward. You can see Chromebooks, infrastructure for new construction additions, laptops, some security equipment and cameras, network wiring, and classroom audiovisual. There are funds included in the 24-25 budget to implement the Fergus recommendations. And the Curriculum and Instruction Department will have funds to continue the implementation of the K-2 ELA curriculum. Thank you. This concludes the presentation.
All right. So we will have our questions reserved for the action portion of the meeting. No. We're going to. Okay, we'll do 2 questions now for each board member. We'll just go around, and then we'll have public speaks, and then action portion, 2 more questions. What? Okay, we can start. So we'll just go around. Okay, whoever is, just raise your hand, yeah. Board Member Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Burnside. I understand, this is a very strenuous and complex process, so I appreciate you putting that together. It went by a little quickly. I mean, I personally have seen a draft of these slides, but I think I'm going to start with this. I think what we have discussed internally was the actual budget gap, like the deficit, is $9.6 million. And you factor in the revenue that you showed, the savings, and that led to the $2.7 million RIF. Can you just, I think it would be beneficial for the community to just really kind of understand that, because I think it was a bit spread out in the presentation.
Yes, 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to go category by category on the savings and the expenses. So for the elimination of permanent building subs. Okay, give me 1 second. I'll broadcast the presentation. I'm sorry, it's not letting me reconnect. But yeah, I'm going to go off of slide number 20. Okay? So I'm going to go off of slide 20. All right. So for the reduction of expenses and increasing the revenue that assists in offsetting the deficit, the first step was eliminating permanent building subs. That was a savings of approximately $600,000. Now, historically, that was being funded through COVID relief funds. However, those funds have expired or will expire, so we absorb that into the general fund, Fund 10. Now, that's just not sustainable, and this is why we're pushing that out of the general fund.
Can you define permanent building subs for us,
Yes,
please?
they're not the daily subs that you would just call up first thing in the morning and have come in. They have a regular assignment, so they know where they're going to be every day.
And I just want to clarify, because I think I personally was also very confused for a little while, but just to clarify, as you've all seen, we have actually increased the rate for daily subs, which is excellent. But, so what we're talking about is permanent building subs that we use ESSER funding, and a big chunk of that budget was due to health benefits that we were covering. Is that right?
Yeah,
Or-
the ESSER funds were helping to pay for payroll and benefits.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we're going to move some of the costs from our lunch monitors from the general fund to what's called an enterprise fund, Fund 60, which is our food service fund. When we submitted our application with the Department of Agriculture this spring, we made sure we had that in there, and it was approved. So we have aides on all of our buses, whether there's a special needs child that has an IEP driven that requires an aide. We're going to scale that back to have only aides on buses when it is required. We've got a dental program right now that we've talked to our broker. If we move to a self-insured program, there's going to be a minimum savings of about $100,000. Also, our tuition for the county special services district enrollment is down, so we will be able to save approximately $150,000 there. We looked at all the maintenance accounts, and we're also using a maintenance reserve to help supplement those accounts. So we were able to decrease the cost of that by $600,000. So I sat. Oh, Sheila. Okay. We sat with Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction and also Director of Facilities across the district. Our supplies are going to be cut, and that's going to save us about $580,000, as well as textbooks. That's another $86,000. And with the expiration of the K-5 math curriculum, the upfront cost from last year, it's already been implemented. We're able to save about $774,000, and we're also able to decrease the budget line for professional development, and that's approximately $74,000. On the flip side is our revenue. Above the 2% tax cap, we're able to exercise a healthcare adjustment, which is approximately $700,000. We also have an enrollment adjustment of approximately $645,000. Miscellaneous revenue increased about $75,000. That's due to the interest being earned on our bank accounts. And we also have SEMI, which is for Medicaid eligible students. That's a number that's given to us by Trenton, and that's an increase of $26,000 over last year. I explained how we were able to increase extraordinary aid by $1 million, and then we just got an increase in state aid of $1,025,178.
Board Member Sackett Gable.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burnside. So I understand there are a lot of hard decisions here, and I understand that instructionally with the items being cut, we would make do for the 24-25 school year, but obviously we wouldn't be operating at an optimal level. So my question is, how do we come back? How do we rebound from that point to get back to where we want to be able to function and run the way our school district needs to instructionally?
Board Member Sackett Gable.
Thank you.
Board Member Sackett Gable.
Mr. Burnside. So I understand there are a lot of hard decisions here, and I just
I guess it goes without saying, we're just going to have to do more with less. But while we are saving this money, we are allowing ourselves to have the revenue kind of catch up and hopefully surpass our expenses. It'll take time. This is kind of like a correction, if you will, and it will just take a little bit of time for us to generate the revenue and keep saving, and then we'll be at a place where we can actually start to thrive again.
Okay, I have a lot of questions, but one is transportation related. So are we going, our numbers that we had last year from our bidding was, I think what we said, like 120,000 per bus or something. Our contract for next year, are we locked into that same rate per bus that we had last year? Or do we have to rebid any new routes based on what will be placements this year? I'm just making sure that like there's not going to be a surprise this spring when it comes to our contracts and any additional costs with respect to kindergarten placements and any new routes.
Renewal season is coming up. We haven't seen any numbers yet. I can't answer any of that.
So meaning currently our current transportation, the current budget we have for transportation could change. You might need more money is what you're saying,
Oh,
depending on our Sussex and bidding.
so that was one area we really didn't have an impact on. I mean, I know I saw about $100,000 for aid and lieu. Whoops, sorry. But that's pretty flat for that budget. So it didn't go up, it didn't go down. We believe we will have enough money for a built-in CPI increase of approximately 5.8%.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we will be going to bid for, there's a potential that we'll be going to bid just for some new routes this year.
Well, if everybody's renewal comes in super high, we would have no choice but to go out to bid. But right now, we have the option to renew. We don't have to go out to bid.
Okay, okay. I can wait for my next question. Who wants to go?
Board Member Meyer?
Sure. So just, Mr. Burnside, to get some more clarity, I think, for myself and for the public. You know, I'm looking at slide 19, which talks about our budget challenges, and we list here a number of the items that have increased in cost. And at the bottom, there's a single bullet here that discusses the district facing a reduction in force of $2.7 million. Can you explain in layman's terms what that actually means?
Thank you, Board Member Myers. What that means in layman terms is that after we crunched the numbers and we did all the internal cutting, we still found ourselves $2.7 million shy of a balanced budget, which means to make up that balanced budget, we are going to look at a reduction in force. Presently, what that means is that we're looking at having to cut 30 to 40 positions. And that process will begin with the internal team following the conclusion of this budget, where we are going to really look at, first of all, we're going to go back and look at our budget again and go to all our departments to see if we can get that number down. And then we are going to make sure in making those particular cuts that we keep a keen eye for protecting our classroom instruction piece. And it's going to be felt all the way from central office all the way down to the classroom. So everyone is going to have to feel the brunt of that. It gives me no joy to have to say that, but by law, we have to have a balanced budget. And this is at this point, this is the only way we can get to our balanced budget.
Board Member Whitletter?
Thank you. Given the expectation that the amount of resources available next year will be limited, and recognizing that the local taxpayers are financially stressed, what analysis has been done during the budget development process of the major categories of expenditures to determine if the resources are being effectively and efficiently allocated? Have you identified trends in the rate of growth of expenditure, and what have you gleaned from this work?
Yes, thank you. So we do a lot of historical trend analysis. Obviously, we compare budget to actual. We're looking at what our current expenses are and what we're going to project to spend in each of those counts by the end of the year. That's how we learn how much we need to budget for the following year. One of the areas that we did identify, and this has been a trend over the last couple of years, is our investment in special services and specifically the paraprofessionals. We've got an increase this year of approximately $1.567 million. We made that a similar investment last year when we identified that trend. That's the one area that we noticed that we're definitely putting a lot of investment into.
Anyone else want
So, and you probably said this, but there's so many numbers and so many different balances and reserves. I just want to make sure that I and everyone else is hearing correctly. So the withdrawal from maintenance reserve is 1.5 million, correct? Last year it was 1 million. So is that all we have in our maintenance reserve is 1.5, or we have more in our reserve, but that's what we're pulling out? I don't understand.
Okay, so we're going to possibly make a withdrawal for $1.5 million. That will leave approximately $3.2 million left.
3.2 million. And there's a certain amount that we have to keep in our maintenance reserve fund, correct or no? What's the deal with that?
There is no minimum requirement.
What do we normally keep in our maintenance fund? Is there a balance that we've, over the past, have tried to maintain?
So since I've been here for 3 years, it's been between 3 and 5 million.
And I think, so
to? All right.
so that
Please
means,
hold.
oh, sorry.
Board Member Gifford has to ask a question.
Okay.
You already asked your question. Board Member Gifford?
No, and I did just want to confirm, I thought we had approximately 1 million left in the ARP ESSER funds to be used by 9/24. That, I just want to.
I don't remember what it is exactly off the top of my head, but it has been budgeted and it's been approved for this year to be spent.
Board Member Acker?
Thank you. This is actually related to ESSER funding. So as you were talking about the permanent building subs and, you know, how that was ESSER funding that we've gotten, I'm just curious, like, there's always been like an end date, right, to the ESSER funding. And obviously we had to do what we had to do to get people back in the buildings and, you know, supplement whatever we needed to get back to normal, I guess. But can you talk about how like the off-ramp from that started and like when that started? Because I guess that's where I struggle a little bit, because it's like extra revenue at some point and it expires. And so at what point do you start to think of, well, these, you know, we are spending this much on this, that needs to go away?
That's a collaboration with curriculum and instruction and special services. I know we knew that this was coming, and I know we've scaled back like our summer programs coming up. So we're still going to have summer programming. It's just not going to be quite what it was. There's a rule called supplement supplant. When you do invest, or not invest, but when you do create a budget for some of these grants, you have to make sure that you can't rely on them. If it were to go away, you have to make sure you can either live without it or you can bring it back in-house.
Hey, Board Member Whitletter, you have a second question?
So just said, I guess, a bit differently, I do think it's important to note that if we do in fact take this $1.5 million this year from the maintenance reserve, that means that for 2 years, we've withdrawn $2.5 million from the maintenance reserve. Those are funds that are set aside for repairs and maintenance to our school facilities. And so I just want us to think about that, because what we hear a lot from our community members is that our schools are not in good shape. And $2.5 million is significant. So when we can't put it to work for our buildings and we're using it to balance the budget, I find that concerning, especially if we will only have $3.2 million left. But my question is related to special services. So we're talking about how specific budget line items under special services continue to rise, paraprofessionals, transportation, and what, I'd like more clarity around is that while these expenses are going up, the district has significantly reduced the per pupil spend for our special education students. Historically, that per pupil spend has hovered around $21,000 to $22,000 annually. In 22-23, the per pupil spend was almost $22,000. And in this year's budget, due to cuts, the per pupil spend was over $5,000 lower. So it was around $16,730 per student. So I'd like to just understand, how does this per pupil spend compare to, for our special services students, compare to neighboring districts? What is that reduction? We have $5,000, over $5,000 less going to work on behalf of our students. And what will the per pupil spend look like in the 24-25 school year for special ed students as well as for gen ed students?
So I don't have all that information off the top of my head, but what I do know is that when there was a report out, we have the highest special ed spending in the county. So if it did decrease, it must be an increase of special ed driven IEPs. I don't have a lot of answers there. There's a lot of research that I would have to do that goes behind all those numbers.
So from that reduction of $5,000, you're not sure what it was attributed to?
We're not going to do follow-up questions like that. We're just going to,
Okay. He didn't really answer the question, so I was just following up.
no interrogations, please. Any other board members have any questions? Board Member Meyer?
Just following back up on the discussion in the, I've lost my version of the presentation here, but with regard to the cuts to the curriculum and instruction items, obviously talking about this reduction in force is tough enough, but looking at reducing items for core instruction, can you discuss the process that the district goes through? Does C&I staff, do they have involvement in discussing how to make these cuts and whether we can afford them educationally?
Yes. So many times I sat down with the assistant superintendent and Ms. Bodner, and I also sat down with Dr. Gilbert, and we went over how this is going to work. And with the K-2 ELA curriculum rollout, we already piloted it last year, so this is just a continuation of that curriculum rollout, and for about $128,000, we'll be able to finish that rollout.
Member Valmani?
So what I find interesting is that our transportation budget is going up by, the costs are going up by $365,000, which is driven mainly by aid in lieu. What that means is basically we're paying for kids who are in private school to go to take the buses, and that's about $1,000 per kid. So what we're saying is that about 320 or about 310 odd kids who are going to private school who we are funding, and strangely enough, at the same time, our enrollments have gone up year on year. So I mean, normally it's like they're inversely correlated, right? So that's the only interesting thing I find. I don't know if you have any insights on that.
No, my first inclination was maybe we get to keep those kids on our books, but we don't. There would have to be some research done on to figure out why. We would have to maybe do a survey, ask the families why that's happening.
All right. Yeah. Member Callahan?
All right, yeah. So I guess, can you talk us through, I think in this, right, we talk about the expenditure chart showing that we're increasing spending in special education, particularly in special education with paraprofessionals, but then it's also listed as a challenge. So I guess, could you just talk us through how do we square that, where we're both talking about how we've increased spending in there, but that it's also listed as a challenge. And I guess like where does that leave us on the question of paraprofessional and our investment in special education broadly as it relates to making these cuts?
I guess the easiest way to explain it is we've got more children needing more needs, and we're addressing those needs. We're putting approximately 1.567 million into more paraprofessionals. We're not neglecting any other areas, really. We still are taking care of OT, PT, home instruction, professional services for child study team. So it's an overall investment in special education. Yes, it's a challenge just because we do have a pretty high number there of 1.5 million. But we do believe that we're doing the right thing.
All right, well, just one more question. Yeah.
I guess just at what point did the administration realize or see that the deficit for next year was, even at 5 million? Because the news that the deficit was so significant, just crossed our desks at the end of February. And, obviously there's a lot of emotion because it was very concerning to say the least. And so, one of the things that I would just want to understand, because we're back where we were last year at this time when we had found out with very late notice that there was a $4.5 million deficit in last year's current budget. I know this is for future, but that, likely would have changed or mitigated behaviors in terms of our spending over the last, I would say close to a year. So I guess I'm just trying to understand like how we got to this place, and while maybe the board wasn't made aware, like what has been done by the district over this last year to help us mitigate spending significantly to only have it be what it is now. I feel like just like more color around why we're finding out about it so late.
All right. Well, we did see this coming, and the FFT committee was notified of the rising costs of paraprofessionals and healthcare in several meetings starting as early as December of 2022. With healthcare costs and contracted services increasing more than 2% annually, there really are so many areas of the budget that can be reduced without affecting other critical areas.
All right, Board Member Callahan.
Yeah, so I think we know our district is facing many challenges. We have competing priorities, maintenance of facilities, launching new initiatives and curriculum instructions, supporting our Fergus recommendations, just to name a few. I know we've also talked a little bit about our investment in special education, but obviously within that, we know there are also challenges. So I think particularly in the last 5 years, there's been such a different landscape in education with COVID, coming out of COVID. I think Board Member Eckert kind of touched on some of the funding that we received as a result. So I think if you could just provide maybe some context about that landscape and what assumptions kind of we're basing our budget on, and how have those assumptions potentially changed over the last 5 years, knowing that these have been a unique set of circumstances, and how successful we've been at kind of making those accurate assumptions before now.
I'm really not sure what the question is.
Yeah, I think just providing some context around the landscape of how we're making some of our decision-making, knowing we've had things like ESSER funding. I think Regina talked about what does the off-ramp for that look like when we have particular funding that we know has an expiration date, and how that's impacted our decision-making and our ability to make assumptions about the budget.
So when we do the budget for any kind of grant, specifically the ESSER funds for COVID, we know that when we're making those budgets, it's not going to be something that's going to be absorbed into the general fund, or it just supplements it. We're not supplanting it. We're not pushing everything out there and putting ourselves in a position where we know we won't be able to afford it when the funds expire. Yes.
All right, and Board Member Vadamani, sorry.
So just a general comment, maybe it's not clear to everyone, is that we don't have a hole in this year's budget. This year's budget is fine. We're chugging along, we're moving fine with this budget. What has happened is we've gone through a process of looking at what we will spend next year and looking at that and finding a hole. So we're actually fixing the hole so that there are no holes 1 year from today. So people should understand that this is a budget for next year, not this year. There's nothing happening this year. So curtailing spending today is not going to help next year. I mean, so you need to understand that. I mean, of course, yeah, sure, we can, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's a budget. It's for next year, not this year.
Sorry, Board Member Meyer?
Thank you. Just another nuts and bolts question, because I think for us, certainly one of the most really difficult parts of this is talking about this reduction in force. And I imagine a lot of folks in the community are going to be experiencing that as well. Dr. Gilbert, to the degree that you are able to shed light at this point, what does that look like in practice?
Mike, there it is. So thank you. So the decision-making process during the reduction of force will involve us prioritizing instruction and minimizing the impact on classrooms while preserving essential educational services like our social emotional programs. We will be analyzing our programmatic needs as well as look at our class sizes. Then we will look at our core values and beliefs on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to drive our decision-making. We are committed to the fairness guided to the selection of positions affected, ensuring that the cuts that we have to make are be strategic to protect the interests of our students and the sustainability of this district. We will be using the last in, first out principle, because that is the fairest principle that we can use to take away from any biases going into what those decisions look like. And it's just going to be a very, very difficult, grueling process, but that's kind of outlines how we're going to go about it. But I also want to emphasize that regardless of what happens on this particular vote, I have asked our budget team to meet with all of our department leaders, get out those budgets. Let's look at them again and see if we can find any type of cost savings or anything that's going to help us save the positions.
All right, so then that'll conclude our questioning. I guess we'll move on to the board president's statement. The school board meeting is a business meeting in public and not a meeting with the public. Oftentimes, it may appear to members of our audience that the Board of Education takes action with very little comment, in many cases a unanimous vote. Before a vote is placed on an agenda at a public meeting, the administration has thoroughly reviewed the matter with the superintendent of schools. If the superintendent of schools is satisfied with the matter, the superintendent of schools is satisfied that the matter is ready to be presented to the Board of Education, is then referred to the appropriate board committee. Members of the board committee work with the administration and the superintendent to assure the members fully understand the matter. After the committee discusses the matter, it is then shared with the other board members for consideration. Only then is it placed on the agenda for board discussion and action at a public meeting. We will now hold our hearing of individuals and delegations. And for this hearing, we're going to only have budget-related matters, and then we're going to move to the action portion, and then we'll have our second hearing of individuals and delegations. So thank you for coming in person and dialing in by phone this evening. The South Lawrence Maplewood Board of Education certainly respects that you've taken the time out of your busy day to address the board at tonight's meeting. We value public involvement in our school district, and we are eager to hear what you have to say. The board does have time limits by policy, and it will be enforcing those to enable as many people to speak as possible this evening. Each individual will be given 2 minutes to speak. Please do your best to stay within the time afforded to you. The first public comment period is usually limited to 1 hour, and the second public comment period may be limited to 30 minutes. All input shared with the Board of Education is taken very seriously and will inform future deliberations and work by the Board of Education and its committees. So, Elizabeth Baker.
Good evening.
My name's Elizabeth Baker. I'm a 22-year resident of Maplewood and the parent of 2 recent Columbia High School graduates. I'm here to speak about legal costs and judgments, a line item that was not included in the budget presentation tonight and that has siphoned resources out of our children's education. I was a Board of Education member for 6 years, and as president of the board for 3 years, I sought to have the district do the right thing in the first instance by our children and community members, rather than waste money and pay for its failures when lawsuits, investigations, and damages ensued. I was the author of the Access and Equity Policy, the 504 Policy, and other civil rights policies that required the district to treat all children and stakeholders in our schools in a respectful, proactive, and supportive manner. Throughout my time here in the district and on the board, I've witnessed firsthand that when the district and the board fail to act competently and do the right thing, the district and our children pay at least twice. They pay from the initial harms that they suffer, and they pay a second time, we all pay a second time, when precious financial resources, administrative time, and energy are squandered on legal costs, damages, compensatory measures that should have never been required in the first place. The district and some boards prior to this board have seen themselves as victims of these processes and costs rather than owning their responsibility, our collective responsibility to do the right thing in the first instance. I'm sorry, can I have my time? Sorry. There is a direct connection between the budget and the reason everyone is in this room tonight. The district and the board have an obligation and an opportunity to finally start doing the right thing with respect to the high school principal, whose rights have been violated repeatedly in this room and throughout various processes in the district over the last year. You have the opportunity and the obligation as board members to take charge, to lead at this moment, to make sure that you understand firsthand, not secondhand, the actual evidence, to set the record straight. And when future requests are made to you, and they will be made to you, to take action with respect to his employment and his livelihood, that you own that responsibility, that you know the facts directly, that you probe respectfully but robustly the legal advice that you're given, and that you own the obligation to do the right thing rather than complain or whine or try to excuse yourself that we did what we were told we had to do. You always have the opportunity to do the right thing. I applaud our children, our students, our teachers who've stood up tonight and this past week at their own potential peril to do the right thing. We've elected you to do the same thing, and we hope that you will. Thank you.
We'll now move on to the action portion of our meeting. I'm sorry, there's no more budget comments? All right, yeah, are there any online comments for the budget, or did you sign up?
Sorry, can you just clarify? This is only for budget matters. No, only for, we will have a second public speaks after the vote is taken.
Relates to an expenditure made by this board historically and a line item in your previous budgets. I'd like to comment. It has nothing to do with freight, which I apologize. Sorry.
All right.
I signed up online and on your list, my name is Nathan Marinoff.
Nathan Marinoff.
Father of a 5th grader at Boulder. My family moved to this district because we were enamored of its diversity, community, and reputation for quality education. Since moving here, we have encountered administrative ineptitude, a complete lack of focus on academic excellence, and a board routinely paralyzed by infighting. In December, when walking through his school, my 10-year-old happily discussed the holiday of Hanukkah with a friend. Another boy overheard the conversation and proceeded to subject my son to a torrent of anti-Semitic abuse. After reporting the incident, we were instructed by Bolden's principal that, 1, the facts my son had recounted were confirmed, and 2, despite this, the district would not deem this an incident of harassment, intimidation, or bullying because the incident, and here I quote, did not take place in a classroom. When we asked if a non-Jewish student would have been treated the same way, we were told to file a police report to pursue the matter further. And here's the budget issue. Given your well-documented history of mismanagement, I cannot claim to be surprised by the outcome, particularly given that you have historically budgeted tens of thousands of dollars to service providers under the professional development budget who regularly deride core aspects of Jewish identity as racist or genocidal. What happened to my son was not an isolated incident, and it was the natural outcome of your spending practices. Your myriad failures have left me no choice, and my wife no choice, but to remove our son from this district at the earliest possible opportunity. I can't make you care, but I do hope that when each of you goes to sleep tonight, you will be haunted by the thought of a 10-year-old boy coming home crying because the system you administer and set up that was supposed to protect him and children like him did absolutely nothing. Each of you is accountable, and each of you should be ashamed.
All right, we'll move to the action portion of our meeting.
For your consideration tonight, I have resolution number 4585. Can I get a second?
Second.
We are now in discussion.
Board Member Deval Wilson.
So, as Regina said, this is a really big gap, and I spent today really trying to go through all the documents really thoroughly. It was 10 million, now 9.5 million, and so I'm apologizing in advance if my questions seem mundane, but I just want to make sure that I have a full understanding of our budget and the budget process. So, for example, line number 740, the revenue from local sources. We had budgeted 438,753 last year. This year we have 0, and I just want to understand why. One, what is the local sources from revenue, and why don't we have any this year?
So the local sources are grants that are donations. So it's the PTA, it's if they get a public service grant, it's not a federal grant or a state grant. So at the time when we're doing this budget, we don't know if they're going to spend it completely by June 30th. So if they don't, we automatically move it into next school year. It's not lost. It's just that we can't take that 400,000 and move it over because they may wind up spending all of it, and then there's nothing there. So it's not an unusual practice. It's something we've always done. So it's not, it's not lost money or anything like that.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Board Member Vatlamani.
So I'm traditionally given a choice between maintaining buildings and keeping teachers. We always pick keeping teachers. That's just natural. So given that we have 3.2 million in the maintenance reserve, and going against another board member talked about maintenance, can we not pull another $700,000 out of the maintenance reserve and use that to offset some of the layoffs that we're having?
So I'd like to say yes, but in theory, no. So if we were to pull out another 700,000, and that would make the number 2.2 million, we would have to make sure our maintenance budget is at least $2.2 million, because they will look at that. So off the top of my head, I don't know what those account numbers total to. They may only total to 2 million, and if we're going to pull 700,000, we've got to put 200,000 more into the maintenance line. They're going to look at to make sure if you're taking, like I said, if you're having revenue of 2.2 million of maintenance, they're going to look at the maintenance accounts and make sure we have $2.2 million. But like I said, I don't know what the accounts off the top of my head look like. In theory, you could, but at a minimum, we would have to do our due diligence and make sure there's at least that amount of money on those account lines. I hope that answered your question. Okay. Oh, okay.
So my second question is, can you remind the board what the cost for implementing the Fergus implementation plan for this year is?
Yes, I sat down with Dr. Gilbert, and we went through the recommendations. We have $525,000 budgeted in the 24-25 budget for the Fergus recommendations.
So again, kind of going the unpopular route of, actually, I don't know if it's unpopular, whatever, is trying to protect our teachers. Can we not reach out to the settlement party and figure out if we can postpone this settlement by 1 year and use the $525,000 to save the instructional staff at least?
I'm going to defer to Patrick on that one.
That would have to be a larger discussion in an executive session with your special counsel that represents the district in that lawsuit. It's not something that's been previously discussed or raised, so we have no direction. We have never even broached that subject with them to see if the party would be interested, nor have we looked into it to see what it would look like in terms of breaking down what that $525,000 is allocated for, and whether it could even be used for something other than the Fergus implementation. So it would be a much larger discussion to figure that out.
But I'm hoping that both these discussions that we have can be done between today and the final budget, so that way, we can squeeze every little dollar we have out of there. So because, this is not, nobody's having, a good time passing this budget right now.
So I just want for a point of clarity, the 525 that's been allocated is what we estimated based on the plan that we were putting together in order to implement it. If this board wants us to go back and look at that number to see if there's some adjustments we can do, I'm happy to do that. But I don't want people to think that the lawsuit told us that's how much we had to do. With the law, we're trying to make sure we live up to the tenor of the lawsuit in terms of doing what we are been asked to do, and the team got together, and that is the cost right now on what some things we want to put in place. But it's on the table. So if the board is asking me to go back with the team and look at that number in the interest of trying to save some bodies, I'm happy to do that.
So just bouncing off of that, two things. One, obviously, I'm not happy about the RIFs and the cuts, and I'm very concerned about our most vulnerable students in our district, which are students of color and our special services students. But that said, I do know that we do need to think very creatively to problem solve, and so just wanted to, for the community as well, to understand, like tonight, the intention is that we're trying to pass this preliminary budget, but then the final vote on this budget is April, correct? I forgot what the date is, late April. And then, so technically, in between today and April, even though this is the preliminary, there can still be conversations, we can still be problem solving and trying to make potential adjustments until that final April date, because we're not voting on this again next week, right?
That is correct. The final budget hearing will be on April 25th.
Board Member Meyer?
So this budget discussion is happening in the shadow of the Board of School Estimate meeting scheduled for Monday, and the bond that's being proposed there. Mr. Burnside, for the clarity of everyone here, could you explain what relationship that vote on Monday has with this budget here, and the degree to which the money the district will be paying out on that bond is related or not related to the fund that teacher salaries come out of?
Thank you. So these are mutually exclusive budgets. You've got Fund 30, which is the construction bond, and what you're voting on tonight is Fund 10, 20, and 40. Now, 40 is our debt service, which is also connected to Fund 30 for the construction bond. They're not really related at all.
Okay. And in your budget presentation, in the debt service item, is there a line there that talks about the encumbrance that we'd be looking at from the vote on Monday?
Yes, we did anticipate an interest payment if, in anticipation of it passing. If it does not pass, we can revise the debt service tax levy. If that's what happens, then we can reduce the tax levy amount for the debt service portion of the levy.
Got it. But that amount has nothing to do with the money we have available in that Fund 10, right?
Correct, they're two different, yeah,
Yep.
it's, yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Anyone else? Okay, Board Member Whitletter?
One of the things that, when we were looking at the budget highlights that wasn't there, was related to any like new student achievement initiatives. Are you aware of any investments in this budget that will be contributing to those goals?
Just the K-2 ELA rollout continuing. That's all I know, unless Dr. Gilbert has any.
No, I think what's not said in there is that the things that we did not cut out of C&I. So we can do a thorough analysis with our curriculum and instruction assistant superintendent, but we still have things, they're still working on the rollout of that particular program is for the phonics work that's going on, and we still got our math work that's being implemented that's in there. I think this particular piece that was cut out was just like the first part of the implementation of our K-Math initiative. And so many of the academic programs that we're still working on are still functioning for C&I to roll out. So phonics, the math initiative, we're doing some work with science and other things of that nature. So some of those academic forces are still in play.
I think the Fergus recommendations, keeping that investment is really important because these are new initiatives and we should always make sure that we're budgeting for student achievement. Like that's what our tax dollars, in my opinion, should be a main priority of where those tax dollars go.
Just have a question related to that. I know one of the things we also talked about investing in for next year was having improved data, bank, I don't know what they're called.
Yes.
Yeah, data warehouse, thank you. And so was that going to be connected to Dr. Fergus's recommendations or is that in our budget for next year? Because it's so needed for the district, especially when it comes to tracking our student achievement.
Right, so I can give you just a quick rundown of some of the analysis that are located in the Fergus in the money that's allotted for the Fergus recommendation. There's some professional development dollars. One of the things we've been working with Dr. Fergus is on building some infrastructure pieces, like, what is our data services going to look like? What is our professional development foundations going to look like? What are the functions and things we have to put in place to insulate so when we start making the necessary changes, it's gonna hold. So we still have some consulting dollars that we have to put in there because, you know, we still have to build something internally to sustain that. It also includes work towards, we got our workforce diversity workforce that's working. Part of that plan is for the recruitment as well as the retention of educators of color, right? So part of the dollars in there are things for building like affinity spaces for our educators, looking at how we build affinity spaces for our young people. And so in all of those dollars, those are some of the things that we wanted to put out to say, you know, this is gonna get us going and get started. And so the data warehouse piece is not quite in there because we're actually going to eliminate some other things that we're working on in order to house and pay for our data warehouse. So that's going to be like a flat line or a wash because we're going to be able to take care of getting a new data warehouse through removing some of the data things that we have now that we aren't using.
All right, if that's all, I guess we'll take roll. One more question.
Sorry. I guess it's more of a comment than a question, but, you know, I think one of our goals in FFT last year was to track, you know, one of the public speaks points, our legal bills. And we also talked about looking at school by school budgets, making sure that now that we have this integration in place, that every child is getting that equal share of resources. And so I guess I am now asking a question, but one, I hope that this year we can continue on those goals in FFT. I know we started a legal tracker. Mr. Burnside, I know it took a long time to put that together, but I think it's really important that we continue to look at our legal bills and the trends and understand if there are things that we could be doing better in other departments from a C&I perspective, from a special services perspective to reel that in. And the only way to do that is to really dig into the data of our bills as well as our, what's the word I'm looking for? Settlements, thank you. And so, I think you didn't even say it, I'm talking to myself now, but anyway, so yeah, so one is, so with that said, have you looked at the school by school spend based on this budget for next year? And if not, is that something that can be looked at over the next couple of weeks as we're evaluating this budget? Thanks.
If I remember correctly, when we discussed it in FFT, we were waiting for the intentional integration to be complete before we could do a nice equitable school by school analysis. And yes, it can certainly be done when that's complete.
I guess I just have a question, just kind of piggybacking off of that idea of looking at legal expenditures. How much will the audit of special services factor into that audit, like I was looking at the audit of those costs?
So we were talking to that auditor. We believe that should be like a second part to the audit. This first part is just, it's going to touch that, but the way he explained it is that's going to be a deeper dive. That's going to be another RFP because it's probably going to be quite a bit of money. Well worth it though.
Right, Board Member Eckert.
Thank you. It's just more of a comment, and there's been a lot going on, not only in just the past week, past couple of months. I just want to go back to where I was last year, same time, as a pretty brand new board member being thrown into, a budget approval process, which, I'm always the first to say budgeting and the finance stuff is certainly not my area of expertise. But I really just want to continue to underscore that I would really love to see a revised budgeting process going into the next school year. I know that it's challenging. I know that, state aid numbers come in pretty late. But it, quite frankly, was very difficult to receive some of the documentation just a couple days before this meeting sitting out here, spreading out all of the information, trying to really understand, because there are implications, as we've discussed, right? If this doesn't pass, what happens? And, the ideal situation is that you get to your preliminary budget is really pretty much your final. And I just want to underscore the importance of that. And it's something I advocated for. I know that a couple of other board members did as well. And I think especially as we look at this specific time around, the fact that we have that, $9.6 million deficit, we've been able to get it down. However, that includes a RIF. And so it's, I feel like I'm in the same spot, but actually in a more difficult spot. So, FFT, like if we can figure out a better process and a more improved process moving forward, I think that would be beneficial to all. Thank you.
Board Member Callahan.
Thank you. So not really sure, to be honest, if this will be a question or a statement, but I feel it's important for me to just name. I know other folks have said this tonight. I know that none of us sitting here feel good about this. I know for me personally, both as a board member and quite frankly as an educator, I'm really sensitive to the impact of the information that we're receiving tonight, particularly about a reduction in force, but not limited to also thinking about reducing some of our budgets around professional development, around curriculum and instruction when we've lifted so many things and have so much work to do. And so I think some of my broader concerns really here are around some of the tension between some of the goals that we're talking about. We're talking about wanting to reduce our legal bills as a goal, but also potentially reducing paraprofessionals, right? Those two things are really hard to coexist, right? We can't reduce paraprofessionals while improving services in-house for our kids, while also reducing the likelihood that we may have to, in fact, send kids out of district to receive some services. And so I think when we're having some of these conversations, another thing that's coming to mind is as we're reducing, we're talking about a reduction in our workforce writ large. We're also then talking about folks who will remain here, who will inevitably bear the brunt of that and have an increased workload on top of what is already a barely manageable workload already. And I have concerns too then about morale, concerns about retention when those things are already really, really challenging. And so there's really no easy answer to any of this, but I feel compelled to share some of those broader concerns, both in the short term and the long term. Particularly, we are in the middle of a really sensitive time in education when educators are incredibly hard to retain, incredibly hard to hire. And so my fear in losing some of these jobs is that once gone, we're not getting them back. And so I just wanted to say that publicly because I have some major concerns. And while I understand the ramifications of the decisions we're making here tonight about the budget and the practical implications of passing it, I also have incredible reservations about what this means for our district. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our vote.
Board Member Callahan?
Incredibly reluctantly, yes.
Board Member Deval-Wilson?
Echoing everything Liz said, this sucks, yes.
Board Member Eckert?
Also very reluctant, yes.
Board Member Gifford?
Yes.
Board Member Meyer?
Only seeing no other better option presented tonight, yes.
Board Member Sackett-Gable?
Yes.
Board President Telesford?
Yes.
Board Member Vadlamani?
Yes.
Board Member Whitletter?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we will have our second hearing of individuals and delegations. So, should I just start with these first two? Yeah. All right. Paul Stefan.
Good evening. Hello. Happy Pi Day. My name is Paul Steffen. I'm a South Orange resident, former teacher. I wanted to talk about the recent events surrounding Mr. Sanchez and what I think it means for our district. I know the board is not at liberty to discuss personnel matters or matters involving individual students, and the public does not have potentially all the information, but I think some things are clear. First, if the board received a report that was not properly vetted and approved, the right thing to do would have been to get it properly vetted and approved rather than to have it sent to the police department. And if the allegations against Mr. Sanchez are true, it should not have taken 10 months to investigate that and take appropriate action. So in either case, as I see it, there's been a real failure of process. And I hope that's something that the board is going to work to ameliorate. I think it goes without saying that when there's serious allegations made against somebody, that needs to be investigated carefully and promptly. And doing so is a benefit to our students and to our district staff and employees. You all know that we have a vacancy in the superintendent position, in the principal of CHS. Board member Callahan just spoke about retaining educators. It's important to retain the right people and to attract the right people, but people also need to feel that they can operate in systems that work. And I hope the board is going to work to try to create and better those systems for the benefit of our administrators and our teachers and most of all, our students. Thank you.
Rhea Beck.
My heart is so heavy for our school district. Educators are absolutely terrified. High school kids are baffled. And parents are just outraged that once again, machinations and mischief are at the forefront of our attention, rather than attention to educating the children, our children, that we've entrusted y'all with. I hope we can finally say we've hit rock bottom. How we get out of this mess, I don't know. What I do know is that this board needs to do everything in its power to ensure a beloved administrator is able to disentangle himself from the nightmare he finds himself in. It's a nightmare that you all bear some responsibility for. I want to urge each of you to be courageous, to center the humanity of both victims in your actions, not just abide by the rules in all their vague and labyrinthian bureaucratic demands. This isn't just another day in Soma where careers are casually ruined by board members and shadow actors. I can't believe I even, this is someone's life and liberty on the line. I can't even believe I have to say that, but I'll repeat it. Frank Sanchez's liberty is on the line. Even if we don't need him, his wife needs him. His children, his 3 children, need him. If there is any way that you can advance this investigation toward a just resolution, we urge you, we demand of you. Actually, we beg you, do what is good and what is right. Thank you.
We'll move on to our online public speaks. First is Carrie Gordon.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, yes.
Hi, my name is Carrie and I'm a parent of 2 children at Columbia High School. I know the focus tonight is on the budget, If our government properly funded education and healthcare instead of bombs, we would not have this huge budget deficit. With that said, I wanted to speak briefly about the Ramadan letter because there was no need to issue an apology or in the manner it was done. You have a resolution that affirms that you will teach the truth and a district policy on controversial issues that, with the format of your apology, you have failed to uphold. The International Criminal Court of Justice has ruled that there is plausible genocide taking place in Palestine, and preeminent scholars in the field of Holocaust and genocide studies, such as Brad Siegel, who spoke at Seton Hall University the other week, have called this a textbook case of genocide. We also know that the United States has given billions to fund Israel's bombing of Gaza. Israel has bombed over 100 mosques in Gaza and destroyed 80% of the infrastructure and killed tens of thousands of people, the majority of which are women and children. There's also a siege that has cut off fuel, water, fuel, and electricity. This would all definitely make celebrating Ramadan very difficult, as many Palestinian Muslims live in Gaza. These are facts. People can try to dispute it, but this genocide is well documented, and many trusted human rights groups have confirmed these facts. It isn't typical to mention Palestine during Ramadan, but this year, as Muslims fast for Ramadan, they can't help but think of those starving to death in Gaza, and they can't help but think of the lack of food to break fast in Gaza. At the Crescent Moonlighting in Maplewood this past weekend, they also spoke about Palestine. Palestine isn't only a Muslim issue. My family is Christian Palestinian. A priest in Gaza said that if all those that call the Muslim prayers are killed, that the call to Muslim prayer would be heard from the churches. Please, in the future, don't let yourself be bullied and follow your own policies and resolutions. Sure, the Ramadan flyer didn't
Thank you, Carrie.
sugarcoat the facts, and thus might have caused discomfort to some, but referencing Palestine is not
Thank you, Carrie.
anti-Semitic. Mentioning the genocide.
Next is Fariha Chugul.
That committee member is not online.
Next is Tia Swanson.
I'm actually here in person. And I don't have much to add than to the eloquence that we've already heard tonight. I signed up basically because I wanted you all to know the extreme upset in the community. I think I felt generally sick to my stomach when I heard that Frank Sanchez had been arrested for doing his job on our behalf. And then to find out that perhaps the report that led to his arrest was given to the police by members of this board is extremely, I don't even know what to say, but it doesn't say anything good about our community, our sense of treating each other with respect and giving each other the benefit of the doubt and putting our faith and trust in those we hire to do the jobs and giving them the benefit of explaining how they go about their jobs. So I just want you as a board to know the extreme upset and also to do all in your power, since it seems that it may have begun here, to clean up the mess if you can and are able to. It seems that there is a report that has cleared him of wrongdoing that you may have, and if you are able to get that to the prosecutor's office, I don't know all the ins and outs of the legal system, but I do think that you need to reiterate all in your power to clear Frank Sanchez's name and to show the world that this is not the kind of community we are, that we are people who can give each other the benefit of the doubt. Thank you.
Next, we have Megan Dirk.
That committee member is not online.
Next is Shannon Cuddle.
That committee member is not online.
Next is Sun Jackson.
So I am a student at CHS, and though it is opening night of the CHS musical, so my peers could not make it, I speak on behalf of them when I say Frank Sanchez is a wonderful man who does not deserve this. Adolescent people like me love to make fun of authority figures, such as teachers and principals. It's like a form of therapy, something that gets us through difficult grades and bumpy roads during school. However, Frank Sanchez is the one guy I haven't heard any kid poke fun of. No matter how immature we are as kids, we've always respected Mr. Sanchez a lot. He sees something in all of us. Personally, I'm a freshman at Columbia, so I haven't had much experience with him, but one of my best friends has, my brother, Jarrett Jackson. Jarrett is a senior going to college to study film this summer. Jarrett loved Mr. Sanchez. When he imagined himself graduating this year, he imagined Mr. Sanchez being there to cheer him on. One of the reasons my brother is pursuing film is because of the wonderful adults in his life who have supported him, such as Frank Sanchez. Mr. Sanchez has acted in multiple of my brother's films just to be there to support him. That's one of the reasons he's wonderful. He sees something in every student. So many principals look at the students of their school as a unit, a group of people there for their work. Mr. Sanchez, however, saw something in every student, such as my brother. He cares about all of us so much. If he sees a student struggling with a film project for school, he'll be their actor. If he sees someone on edge, he'll give them space to calm down. If he sees kids risking their lives over a fight, he'll want to break that fight apart. He cares. He cares, and he is a rare gem. There are many people who are leaders, but he is a leader. Thank you.
And that concludes our public speaks. Board Member Callahan?
I just want to say that we have heard and acknowledged, we've had an overwhelming amount of feedback from the community tonight and in recent days demanding a thorough investigation. And
I will say it for, no.
people have made comments after public speaks before.
No, you can't.
It happened last year.
No, well, I don't know about last year, but you can't. Absolutely not.
We've had comments.
Let's just.
The process that you guys used last year was that people did not comment after public comments. I recall that the historic, what occurred was that the superintendent used to address public comment after public comment. He was the only one that addressed those things.
Okay, so we're going to move on to new business. Does anyone have any new business? All right. The Board of Education will meet in public session on Thursday, March 21st at 6:30 p.m. in the district meeting room at 525 Academy Street in Maplewood, New Jersey. Immediately following the opening of public session, the board will move to go into a closed session in the superintendent's office at 525 Academy Street in Maplewood, New Jersey, as well as using an online video conference platform to discuss personnel matters with the attorney-client privilege, legal negotiations, and other matters that may arise and require discussion, to be announced at a later date. Immediately following the closed session, the Board of Education will meet in public session, estimated to be at 7:30 p.m. in the district meeting room at 525 Academy Street in Maplewood, New Jersey, in person, utilizing an online video conference platform, which will include hearing of individuals. The community can view the meeting by following the steps which will be listed on the agenda. If there are members of the community who would like to attend the meeting in person, please note that masks and social distancing are optional in accordance with the guidance received for the local DOH and the CDC. Action will be taken. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting at 9:46 p.m. Adjourning. All in favor? Aye. All right, we are adjourned at 9:46 p.m.